I have just arrived back from Watches and Wonders 2022. I have a cup of tea with a pug on, and I also have the Oris Aquis. It's not the Aquis, it's the ProPilot X. So used to saying Aquis. So, the Oris ProPilot X, it took me by surprise for several different reasons. One is that they have a pink coloured dial. This is kind of like Marmite for a lot of people. Some people love it, some people don't like it very much. They also have a blue version and a slate grey version. My personal favourite being probably the blue, and then the pink, actually. Kind of controversial there, but let's talk about the specs. But before we move on to the specs, we are giving away 5 high-quality Breguet hats. I did try to steal one of these, but you know, I wasn't allowed. All you need to do to be in with a chance of winning these is subscribe to the channel and comment with your favourite Breguet model. My personal favourite is the Breguet Marine, but I know that you guys might disagree, so let me know in the comments. Let's dive straight into the specs then. The case diameter on this piece comes in at 39mm. That is pretty perfect for my wrists. My wrists come in at about 6.5 inches, so they're a little bit on the smaller side. I would start at around 38mm and maybe work up to about 42 at a push. Also, a little point to note is when it comes to smaller dials, brands can actually use more vibrant colours. And the reason that they can do this is because they're not trying to camouflage the size of the watch. When you look at bigger watches, 42, 43, 44 mil, they all use darker colours in order to try and shrink down the perception of the case so that more people can wear it. And you can see this because they've used pink and they've obviously used blue as well. So it's a nice touch. Without further ado, let's get into the specs using our digital calipers. So the height of this watch, or the thickness of this watch, comes in at 12mm according to our digital calipers, and the lug to lug comes in at 45mm. This is quite a compact watch. It kind of takes on and adopts that 70s Genta inspired design that we can see in the AP Royal Oak or the Patek Philippe Nautilus or Tissot PRX for an example. And then we'll get to the bracelet because that adopts it as well. The case and the bracelet are made from titanium. This watch is pretty much entirely made from titanium, which gives it that lightweight approach. But what it also gives it from a design perspective is a darker metal. Titanium by its nature is darker than, for example, steel. So if you look at the steel on my Amiga and then compare it to the titanium, this will be that slight bit darker. And what this does is it pops out the dial that little bit more. So when you use bright colours with titanium, it really works. I am pausing this episode of Time on the Wrist to do our tradition, to do the wrist check. What is on your wrist at the moment? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. On my wrist at the moment is the Omega Seamaster 300-meter diver. It's the watch that I have on most of the time. It is the king of watches in my opinion. But let's have the conversation. Let's start with the bracelet before we dive into the case, the bezel, the face, and all that good stuff. So the bracelet is like something from the space age to me. Oris have really adopted a futuristic approach, especially at Watches and Wonders this year, and I think it is working. What I do need to say, after seeing the comments online, after seeing some of the criticism that this watch has faced, when Gerald Genta first designed the AP Royal Oak, he was a madman. Fast forward a couple of years, 10, 20 years, it's now one of the most desired watches in the world. But anyways, I digress massively. That is what tends to happen on this channel. I end up ranting about stuff and then Drew waves at me and says, shut up. So the bracelet, it tapers in really, really quickly and it bounces the light really nice. It is quite similar to the Tissot PRX and the Patek Philippe Nautilus kind of bracelet. I really like it, but what I'm maybe not as big a fan on is the fact that it tapers in. And at the clasp at the bottom just there, it kind of has a bulge. Now, although this is futuristic, it's different. I've not seen any other watch brands do this. It's just a little bit too much for me. The bezel around this watch, or the limited bezel that slopes down very, very quickly, has sort of engraved lines through it that kind of angle all the same way. It's almost circular, and it looks really, really nice. I don't know what you would call that, so if any of you guys know, then let me know in the comments. These models have anti-reflective coating on both sides of the domed sapphire crystal glass, but what you need to remember here is that when you have anti-reflective coating on both sides, it is that little bit more likely to scratch. With that said, my Amiga has anti-reflective coating on both sides, and it doesn't have one scratch on it. I've had it for 2 years. So you know, if you're going to chuck it against a wall, it will scratch. If you're not, then you should be fine. The crown has the same level of detail as the rest of the case. It has those lines running through it that are engraved into the steel, which look really, really nice. It's actually very comfortable to turn, and it doesn't kind of cut into your hand. You get some crowns that are that little bit too aggressive. This one isn't. It kind of winds really, really nicely. But now that we've covered the crown, now that we've covered the specs, let's get into this dial, because it's probably the most striking detail about this watch. The dials come in a variety of different colors. There's 3 in particular if you don't include the skeletonized version. So we have the salmon pink that I have in my hand right now. We have the slate gray, and we also have a blue color that we don't have with us. Personal favorite, as I said before, is the blue, but I would suggest to try them all on, because I'm not gonna lie, my first impressions of this were, you know, the dial's too much. That was my first impressions, but when I tried it on, when I had it on outside, when I had the chance to wear it, it kind of grew on me. But getting back to the point and focusing on these 2 dials at hand, the dials are almost sand blasted, and you can see this in the texture. They're almost matte. They have that kind of slightly bumpy feel to them, which looks really nice. It gives it that little bit more depth. And then you get to the indices. Now on the pink model, or the salmon pink that I have in my hands, the indices are white, which colorway kind of goes. On the gray model, the indices are black, so they stand out more against that slate gray. The hands are extremely reflective and are lighter than the titanium, so it gives it a really nice contrast there. They also have super luminova, which, as soon as I find my flashlight, we will take a look at. As you can see here, the hands have the super luminova in them. It is quite bright at the moment, but in the dark, this pops out a lot more. The Oris logo on the dial is positioned quite comfortably at the 12 o'clock mark, and the date window, to my satisfaction, is positioned at the 6 o'clock mark. You guys know I'm a fan of 6 o'clock date windows. It's not that I can't stand 3 o'clock date windows, it's just that 6 o'clock adds more symmetry to me. Personally, as a photographer, videographer, I just got back from Norway actually, but I won't ramble about that, you can see that on my channel. But yeah, I do prefer 6 o'clock date markers. Now we are going to do quite an exciting experiment. We're actually going to get this on the scales and compare it to my Omega Seamaster. Obviously, they're 2 different brands with 2 different purposes, so there's not really a comparison there, but it will be interesting to see how lightweight this titanium really is, because my Omega doesn't even have a bracelet. But before we do that, Chisholm Hunter are actually authorized retailers for Oris watches. These bad boys will be soon in. Actually, I think they are in at the moment, so they're available to buy. You can click the link below if you want to see them. Let's begin by putting the Oris on the scales. Remember, this is full titanium and does have the bracelet, so it comes in at 99 grams, maybe just pushing 100 grams. And now we are going to put the king, the Omega Seamaster 300 meters diver, on the scales. Remember that this has the rubber strap and not the steel strap, so it's actually a rubber bracelet, not a rubber bracelet, rubber, you get what I mean. 112 grams that is coming back as, so it's actually 10 grams heavier, even though it doesn't have a bracelet. We have covered the dial, we've covered the case, we've covered the bracelet, but now we get to the watch nerd's dream. We get to the movement. This is why I save it till last, because it's my favorite bit. And it's actually quite funny, I'm looking at this pug at the moment. I actually have a pug at home called Wilbur. He's blind in one eye, not doing too well, he's an old man, but I love him to pieces. And whenever I think of home, I think of my first watch that my parents got me, and it was an Oris Artelaire skeleton watch. And because of that, I kind of have a sentimental attachment to Oris. And no matter what they release, no matter how futuristic it may be, I'll always kind of favor them and kind of bias towards them. I just really like the brand. Beating at the heart of this movement is the Oris Caliber 400. It has 21 joules, beats at a frequency of 28,800 VPH, has a power reserve of 120 hours, and is made entirely in-house. That is incredible, but not as incredible as the 10-year guarantee. Just think about that for a second. 10 years. See, if you were to buy a car, they would never in 1,000 years give you a 10-year guarantee. Oris are so assured of their quality that they can do that. We've discussed the dial, we've discussed the case, we've discussed the bracelet, the movement, the pug, Wilbur the pug, but what we haven't discussed is how I feel about these watches personally. And to be honest, I do like that futuristic direction that they're going in. However, I have seen mixed reviews. So what I want you to do is let me know what you think. Do you like this approach from Oris, or are you not as big a fan? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Time in the Wrist at Chisholm Hunter. My name is Harrison, as always. We actually have a couple more watches to film today, which I'm really excited about. Turn the bell on if you want to see them. And on a side note, I'm actually looking for a new strap for my Amiga. I was thinking a grey NATO. What do you guys think? What do you guys think would go well with that? Do you think a grey NATO? I think a grey NATO would go well with that. Anyways, I'm rambling. I'll see you soon.